In a world of finite resources and growing demands, it's time for a new contract between business and society. We face a complex, fast-changing landscape with shifting social and environmental pressures and changing consumer values and choices. This is both our urgent and long-term business challenge. The prosperity of business and society are tied together. One cannot succeed without the other. These issues are our business. And by working together, it's business that has the power to effect significant change. We're in business to provide communities with livelihoods. In turn, they become our employees, customers, and suppliers, so everyone wins. We innovate and compete through the skills of our teams. Developing individuals makes our business better and their lives richer, helping society flourish. A vibrant, inventive, and resilient skill base comes from real diversity. When we include people from all walks of life, we create more stable communities and a better environment for business investment. Future generations depend on society and business using its finite resources sparingly. In turn, our margins are protected, allowing us to invest sustainably in a better quality of life for all. Our business, our future, your legacy. Join the movement for change at bitc.org.uk.
Well, good morning, everybody. Nick, thank you for having us. Thank you for hosting us. I hope you left breadcrumbs back to the coffee station to get back there. Somebody commented as we were coming in, it was like coming to the BAFTAs. So I thought perhaps I should comment on people's shoes. Amanda Jordan, what lovely... Oh, it struck me, I don't know any women's shoes. So churches, what lovely pair of churches you've got down there. I've kind of outed poor Amanda as a cross-dresser or something here. We've got an action-packed series of events for you, starting last night and continuing through the rest of this week that we'll talk about a little bit. We're delighted to be here, delighted that so many of you could join us. I hope you're participating in a number of activities along the way. Would like to begin at the beginning, and that is to thank our core sponsors, Veolia, who are a headline partner with all of this, and you'll see some really interesting information that they've scattered around the venue, sharing with you where they're coming from on the sustainability journey and ideas and things that they want to share with the rest of us. But we've got so many organizations who have participated and will be active with us today. Santander, who are driving our enterprise team. EDF Energy, who are hosting tonight's reception. Tata, who are handling tomorrow's plenary debates. Goldman Sachs with the business class symposium Thursday morning. Nationwide, who are sponsoring our Opportunity Now Awards on Wednesday evening. And Waitrose, who are providing lunch today, which is also welcome. Talk in a minute of just about some of the other events and activities that are happening out there. But let me just kind of contextualize what we're doing today and this week a little bit. The theme of so much of what we're talking about is leadership. What does it mean to be a leader at a time like this? And when we say leaders, we're not just talking about the chief executives of the various organizations. We're talking about leadership throughout those organizations. Everybody in this room is a leader. As you've heard me say before, probably, I've had the privilege of being involved in a number of different kinds of organizations, leading big listed companies, leading nonprofit organizations, and participating in some other types of businesses. And I've learned the hard way that it's very easy to talk about this stuff. It's quite challenging sometimes to put it into application. So part of what we hope happens over the course of this week is we do paint some of those big compelling narratives, those things that get us excited, but we're also following on with practical tools and ideas that we can all take home and apply in our day jobs to advance that ball a little bit down the field, to make sure that we continue on this journey, and that is the theme. We launched last night with an interesting debate with Sir Andrew Whitty of GSK and Peter Mather of BP about leadership. And we were contextualizing that and saying at one level, yes, we are looking at an improved economic environment, and that's good news. And there is an element of rising tides lifting all boats. But we also know that it's choppy, it's uncertain. World events are getting in the way sometimes. And if we look a little bit closer to home, some of these chronic issues, what we're calling the new normal, are here with us to stay for a while. Shifting of power from the west to the east globally, the energy crisis and the shortages of natural resources that we face, the chronic unemployment that we're finding with many people in this country, particularly young people. But married alongside that are the chronic shortages of skills and talents we need to do so many of the things that we have. An erosion of low-paid, low-entry type jobs out there, making it harder for some people to launch, and the consequence of that being this rising gap between the rich and the poor, real wages for many people losing ground, and the social and other tensions that grow out of all of that. Relevant for us to think about, and also relevant as we think about the trust that goes along with that. And we'll hear from the experts in a moment a little bit about what the surveys are telling us about what is trusted and what isn't, and where we go with all of that. And we're beginning to think about how we factor that into our own campaigning. There are mega issues that are applying across all sectors and all businesses out there. Among them, the aging population. You have aging workforces, you have an aging customer base, you've got employees who have aging parents who have to care for them. There are a whole series of knock-on events that come out of that. The other conversation we were having last night, and we'll continue to have this week, is the pace of change out there, and it's accelerating. The prospect that each of us have that our business models could get vaporized almost overnight by a new disruptive technology. We talk about things like big data and nanotechnology and 3D printing and who knows what else that is out there to quite radically reinvent what's happening in a number of these sectors. So we begin to say, well, what does all this have to do with us, and how do we apply this to the campaigning priorities that we collectively have as a movement? As we think about this changing landscape, the pressure that you as businesses have in this very transparent, very social media-driven world. We trended on Twitter yesterday. Some of you will find interesting. I have no idea what that means, but it sounds like a good thing. But the impact that all of that live time 24-hour news stuff and everything else as it travels around there, the impact that it has on customer loyalty, on the disruptions that can happen to your business, and ultimately, I guess, in the changing bargain and contract that you have with your customers and with society, with the changing expectations that are out there in terms of what your business needs to do and what your investor groups will be expecting of you. The different kinds of skills and talents you're going to need to bring to the party to kind of adapt and respond to all of that, and we'll hear from our panel on that very subject in a moment. As I've said, we've got an awful lot of activity going on. The index launch, we've got events around mental health, around the launch of our 28 to 40 research. This is the gender-based research. It's 25,000 plus participants. Will be rolling that out. Actually, it's going on in another room this morning. We'll be talking about it at the Opportunity Now Awards event tomorrow night. Yesterday's FT, if you saw it, second page, nearly the whole second page, talking about the work that we've rolled out this week around mental health and what we're calling the culture of silence around mental health. Some of these things are awkward and tricky to talk about sometimes. Generation Talent, the Business Unusual Conference in Sheffield, the Business Class Symposium, Enterprise, the themes today about the culture needed to drive innovation, and tomorrow about what we need to do to create those new business models. So we hope there's something for everybody in there. And we also have literally hundreds of activities going on within member companies around the land. So it's quite encouraging. We will make sure that we share that with you as we go, and that we think about how we create some legacy to even this week's event, how we begin to capture some of the big ideas, make sure we're transmitting them back. A number of formal pieces of research, but a number of informal things will happen as well. One final point that I would mention before I talk about the CR Index, and that's some of the work that we've been doing around leadership. It's a piece of work we've called Taking It Personally. And this grew out of our realization that businesses, and particularly business leaders, were having some quite serious trust issues. There was a notion out there that organizations were there simply to take care of and reward their investors and perhaps their senior management, disregarding the needs and the impact on customers, employees, and the communities in general. Well, we didn't see business that way, but yet that's a perception that we have to tackle. So we talked to some 300 business leaders and tried to create a case for action. What do we do about this, and what are the practical tools? We talked last night with that group of leaders about personal responsibility, about the very purpose of business. Is the purpose of business just to maximize profit, just to maximize shareholder value, or does it not include things about creating value for your customers and for your wider constituencies, that virtuous circle, which allows your business to continue to grow and prosper through the cycles. We talked a lot about legacy. One of the things I laugh about when I talk to a chief executive about sustainability, I can usually see in their eyes they're thinking, yeah, this is kind of the next guy's problem. But when I talk about legacy, it becomes their problem. And how do we link these two things up? And how do we use the things that are in our collective toolkits, things like the experiential learning that you get on a Seeing is Believing visit, and many other ways, to build upon all of that. And so the report has what we hope are a series of very practical outcomes that business leaders at all levels in the organization can apply. How do you create those clear strategies that align your personal goals and vision with your business goals? How do you make sure that you demonstrate that, particularly when it comes to the reward side of things, and not just cash reward, not just bonuses, which are, I know, a big issue in the financial services sector, but wider. What do you do? We all say we want to focus more on the long term, and we're frustrated. Certainly, as in my days as a chief executive, I used to get so frustrated with hedge funds that measured their investment in us in days or hours. So how do you bring your investors along with you on that journey? How do you communicate a long-term value-creating strategic vision? Value being a part of it, of course, at the core of all of this. How do you create value by living your values? How do these things line up? What are the tools that you can use to develop those new future leaders, and how can we empower all of us to be advocates to drive this message forward? We observed last night that as you track through the media coverage of business, there are 17 negative articles to every positive article. So what do we do to overcome that? How do we change the dialogue that organizations have with their investor base, with their customers, and ultimately within the communities in which they operate? So we've got some ideas on that. Come back to you. Now, just a word about the CR index, and then we'll get into this morning's panel discussion. We changed the game a little bit. We have said right along that this is a journey, it's not a destination. And so with your input and support, we have been steadily increasing the challenges to make sure that this is an effective management tool. It's harder. The standard of best practice has been raised. It was always and is continuing to be a management tool, we hope, a benchmark, a rigorous and tough assessment that you can use to measure your own progress, hold a mirror up against how you're doing, but also begin to compare yourselves with others out there. We recognize that it's frustrating sometimes. It's a lot of work to do. You kind of got your mind around what you needed to do to comply with and to perform under the last one, and now the rules have changed ever so slightly. It makes it tricky when you think about how we use this as a communication tool as opposed to just a management tool, and we're very alive to thinking about how we do that. But at the end of the day, one of the things we've talked about in this whole push that we've had, we talked about it at the AGM, the new contract between business and society, a new type of leader that's needed to drive that forward, and ultimately a more integrated approach to how you do it, leading towards integrated reporting, and that being the tool that allows us to bring investors, customers, and the wider community along, giving them information that they can rely upon. And we hope that the evolution of the CR index begins to do just that. So we've seen, as we've raised the bar, the scores have come down a little bit, taken a hit. We're thinking more about the long-term challenges. We recognize that some sectors have an easier time just because of the regulatory environment that they're in and the information that they already capture, perhaps, have an easier time in implementing some of these changes than others. So we thank you for your input. We're heartened by the feedback. Not everyone is happy. Of course, they shouldn't be in a situation like this, because part of what we're doing is challenging you. Part of what we're doing is being that pebble in your shoe to make sure that you've got the tools to bring your colleagues along as we take all this on board. One of the things I wanted to do, we're kind of cycling through the various performers, but here are our top 10 performers. Well done to all of you. We've got a number of excellent examples in the system of what's been done and what can be done. So we'll take that forward. Now, enough from me. You're going to be hearing from me on and off over the course of the week. Apologies for that. But I want to move on to the next session. You had on your seats when you came in a publication called Fortune Favors the Brave that was done with us and M&S and Accenture. We're going to be hearing from both of those companies in a moment. It outlines what we think is quite an astonishing business and market opportunity out there. thinking about how we take on some of these big issues. This publication talks about innovation. It's a very positive and a very forward-looking piece of work. It's talking about things that we hear about, that we think about, that many people in this room will understand, but not so many back in your home ship will understand. Shared value, doing more with less, circular economies. So these new consumption models, well, what does it mean to me? How does it, I can see perhaps how it might apply in a certain retail context, but I manufacture automobiles. What does it have to do with me? And ultimately, this idea of transparency and customer engagement to legitimize this whole journey. So this morning, we're going to be focusing on this sort of need to drive innovation and how we reward and incentivize this kind of sustainable and responsible behavior. A big agenda.